The Supreme Court decision in the case of Republic of the Philippines versus CLAUR and CLAUR. In Republic versus Mola Cruz, the court stressed that the findings of the trial court on the existence or non-existence of a party's psychological incapacity should be final and binding for as long as such findings and evaluation of the testimonies of witnesses and other evidence are not shown to be clearly and manifestly erroneous. A sharper pronouncement on the respect accorded to the trial court's factual findings in the realm of psychological incapacity was made in CLAUR versus Fernandez as follows. It is not enough reason to ignore the findings and evaluation by the trial court and substitute our own as an appellate tribunal only because the Constitution and the Family Code regard marriage as an inviolable social institution. We have to stress that the fulfillment of the constitutional mandate for the state to protect marriage as an inviolable social institution only relates to a valid marriage. No protection can be accorded to a marriage that is null and void ab initio, because such a marriage has no legal existence. Here, the Republic failed to provide compelling reason to convince the court to deviate from the findings of the trial court, as affirmed by the Court of Appeals. The totality of evidence presented clearly and convincingly show that both parties are psychologically incapacitated from discharging their respective duties as husband and wife. First, their psychological incapacity has juridical antecedence, since their personality structures were manifest even before the celebration of their marriage. The wife admitted she got attracted to her husband despite his notoriety when they were still in high school. Their relationship had already been rocky since the beginning. Her husband was too jealous and obsessed with her, yet he still flirted with other women. Where her husband tried to break up with her, she threatened to commit suicide. On the other hand, when she tried to break up with her husband, he pressured her into staying together. Their quarrels even escalated when they went to college. They would curse each other, and their fights had gotten violent. During the 5 years they had been in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, they broke up and reconciled around 20 times. But then, she got pregnant unexpectedly. She was only 20 years old while her husband was only 21. She herself was hesitant to get married, but got forced to yield because her husband and his parents insisted otherwise. Unfortunately, their relationship turned for the worse after they got married. She struggled living with her husband's parents. She also uncovered her husband's lies about the financial status of his family and his studies. He lived extravagantly, yet he was unemployed and merely relied on her for financial support. Their relationship did not improve even when they moved in with her parents. They separated several times. Her husband would leave her and their son whenever he got upset. They kept fighting like they did before, and they ended up physically hurting each other. There was one incident when she wounded her husband in the head and just watched him bleed. On another occasion, it was her husband who hit her in the face and broke her jaw. Their married life has been marred by disagreements, quarrels, and violence. Evidently, the testimony of the wife successfully discharged the burden to prove her and her husband's psychological incapacity. The trial court and the Court of Appeals properly gave credence to her personal account of what transpired before and during her marriage to her husband, considering that the totality of the behavior of one spouse during the cohabitation and marriage is generally and genuinely witnessed, mainly by the other. Further, the wife's uncle and confidant corroborated her testimony. He witnessed her turbulent relationship with her husband even before they got married. Subsequently, despite their marriage and the birth of their son, the wife and her husband's relationship spiraled downward. Her husband lacked a sense of responsibility and still lived his life like a bachelor. The wife, on the other hand, was always jealous and became a nagger. Worse, her husband continued his philandering ways and started to physically assault the wife. The wife's uncle bore witness to how the husband broke the jaw of the wife during one of their violent fights. Clearly, the respective personality structures of the wife and her husband were already present even before they got married. Their dysfunctional acts when they were in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, and even when they were already husband and wife, have made it impossible for either of them to understand and, more important, to comply with their essential marital obligations. Second, the gravity of their condition cannot be categorized as mild characterological peculiarities, mood changes, and mere occasional emotional outbursts. They resented each other, and it never failed to manifest each time. Their relationship started from being rocky to turbulent to violent. Neither of them accorded the other the love and respect that was due to a spouse or a life partner. Their incongruity depicted a pattern of persistent failure to be a loving, faithful, respectful, and supportive spouse. As shown, their misunderstandings had escalated to frequent quarrels, cursing, and worst, physical violence. Surely, we cannot, by any means, consider them as mere refusal, neglect, or difficulty in the performance of their marital obligations. Third, their respective personality structures are incurable in the legal sense. Their conditions prevented them from complying with their marital obligations as embodied in the family code, particularly the observance of mutual love, respect, and fidelity, and rendering mutual help and support. Their behavior before and after their wedding clearly manifests their psychological incapacity and show their utter lack of willingness to properly treat each other as husband and wife. Their dysfunctional on and off relationship, though solemnized, was not salvaged by their marriage. On the contrary, their formalized union only served to trap both of them in a perpetually loveless relationship. They are so incompatible and antagonistic toward each other that the only result of their marriage would be its inevitable and irreparable breakdown. True, physical and verbal abuse, neglect and abandonment of spouse and children, or acts of infidelity, including adultery or concubinage, each constitutes a ground for legal separation. But where each one of these grounds, or a combination thereof, at the same time, manifests psychological incapacity that had been existing even prior to marriage, the court may void the marriage on ground of psychological incapacity under Article 36 of the Family Code. Here, the husband's acts of infidelity, abuse, neglect, and abandonment on one hand, and the wife's suicidal behavior, ill temper, and verbal and physical abuse, on the other, collectively manifest both of their psychological incapacity in a legal sense. They satisfy the criteria of juridical antecedence, gravity, and incurability. Their behavioral patterns and personality structures clearly show that they are psychologically incapacitated from fulfilling their obligations as husband and wife and as parents to their son. Fourth, the findings of Dr. Castillo-Carcerini support this conclusion. To emphasize, though, Tan-Undul categorically declared that the testimony of a medical expert is no longer required for purposes of establishing psychological incapacity as a legal concept. We no longer look at psychological incapacity as a medical condition or personality disorder, the root cause of which has to be identified. Instead, courts may rely on the testimonies of ordinary witnesses for purposes of determining whether one or both spouses are psychologically incapacitated. Even then, Tan-Undul discussed the parameters for determining the sufficiency of a report rendered by a psychologist or psychiatrist as follows. The rule on admissibility of expert opinion requires the following. First, that the knowledge testified on must be scientific. That is, it must be more than subjective belief or unsupported speculation. Second, The specialized knowledge be of such character that the trial judge be able to understand the evidence or to determine a fact and issue. Third, the trial judge, like a gatekeeper, takes a first-hand look on the scientific validity or the evidentiary relevance or reliability of the principles that underlie the testimony being offered as expert opinion. The focus must solely be on the principles and methodology, not on the conclusions they generate. Thus, based on the evidence on record and applying Article 36 of the Family Code as clarified in the recent landmark case of Tanandul, the court affirms the uniform findings of the trial court and the Court of Appeals that there is clear and convincing evidence here to support the conclusion that the wife and her husband are psychologically incapacitated, in a legal sense, from complying with their marital obligations. Consequently, the marital union between them is declared void ab initio.